The biting Chicago wind howled, whistling through the wires of the old red bridge, an abandoned railway structure that Elisa, 32, a melancholic artist with unruly black hair, transformed into her muse. It was a gray morning, the leaden sky promising snow soon. She adjusted her easel under the dark, rusted bridge, whose beams seemed to bleed history in shades of ochre and brown. A shiver, not from the piercing cold, but from an icy, supernatural sensation, ran down her spine. Suddenly, the twisted metal of the bridge before her shimmered, unnatural, distorting the landscape. It was no longer the solitary, decaying structure, but a vibrant, nighttime gallery filled with bohemian tourists. Laughter and muffled voices echoed. Wine glasses clinked in a silent toast. The atmosphere was festive, almost dreamlike. Then, without warning, a deafening crack ripped through the vision. The bridge, once solid, began to collapse in slow motion, crashing down on the crowd, crushing everything and everyone in a cloud of dust and debris. Smiles turned to masks of terror, desperate screams to distant echoes. The smell of twisted metal and suffocating dust, mixed with the heat of panic, flooded Elisa's nostrils. She felt the ground vibrate beneath her feet, a tremor spreading through her entire body. The scream caught in her throat was the only sound Elisa could make before blinking, the vision dissolving like a fog. Suddenly, she was back to the cold, damp reality under the bridge, the smell of rust and river dampness still clinging to her nostrils, the echo of the fatal crack still resounding in her ears. The premonition was vivid, disturbing, and unmistakable. Elisa tried, in vain, to push away the vivid image of the disaster, but it persisted, a dark, icy echo in her mind, an omen impossible to ignore. She'd had premonitions before, quick flashes of urban tragedies, but never with such clarity and sensory impact. "Arthur, we need to talk about the Red Bridge. The exhibition ... it can't be there. It's an imminent danger." "Elisa, the bridge is the perfect setting for your works. The contrast of your melancholic art with the industrial decay of the place is simply brilliant. The marketing is already out." "It's not physical solidity, Arthur. It's fate. I saw it. It's something I can't explain, but it's real." The words seemed to break in her throat. She felt the overwhelming weight of the premonition, the almost palpable certainty of imminent disaster, and the crushing helplessness in the face of Arthur's stubborn indifference. The air in the gallery, once vibrant with the creative energy of art, now felt heavy and oppressive, laden with a dark foreboding. She felt like Cassandra, a tragic figure condemned to see doom without being heard, her warnings falling on deaf ears. The smell of oil paint, which once calmed and inspired her, now suffocated her, mixed with the sickly sweet and dense scent of lily from Arthur's vase. She dropped her brushes, her heart pounding in her chest, each beat a warning. "Look, I can ask for an extra security review, a final checkup, but the exhibition is confirmed. Hundreds of invitations have been sent. The media has already confirmed attendance. Canceling now would be a financial disaster and a blow to your reputation." And rushed to the Art and Soul Gallery, nestled in the heart of Wicker Park, a vibrant and eclectic Chicago neighborhood. Arthur listened with visible patience, but his eyes, once bright, now showed growing skepticism, a hint of impatience. But demolishing the structure is unfeasible, and security has been reinforced to the maximum. He gestured to the detailed blueprints on his ebony desk. Engineers have attested to the bridge's solidity. It's one of Chicago's oldest structures, yes, but also one of its best preserved, an icon of the city. We've done several inspections. The exhibition of her new series, Urban Skeletons, which depicted abandoned city structures, was scheduled for the following night, and the main stage would be, ironically, the Red Bridge itself. The curator, Arthur Finch, 50, a tall, elegant man with neatly combed gray hair that matched his sarcastic sense of humor, yet who harbored a genuine, almost religious fervor for art, greeted her with a broad smile. "Eliza, my dear, excited for tomorrow? Your works on urban ruins are mesmerizing. The critics are raving." Elisa interrupted him, her voice trembling, almost inaudible, forcing the words from her dry throat. Arthur raised a thin eyebrow, his smile slowly fading, replaced by an expression of confusion and then slight annoyance. She described the vision with agonizing detail, each word laden with the weight of the premonition. The abrupt collapse, the tearing screams of the crushed crowd, the smell of twisted iron and suffocating dust, the heat of despair. "Eliza, I understand you're under immense pressure. It's a big exhibition, your biggest yet." Elisa tried to argue, the urgency in her voice becoming almost hysterical. Arthur sighed, a sound of resignation. Elisa's frustration was a suffocating knot in her chest. "I warned you, Arthur," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. The cold of the Chicago wind she'd felt earlier now seeming to settle within her, penetrating her bones, promising a darkness deeper than any she'd known. The night of the exhibition arrived, dragging with it a dense, sticky fog that embraced the red bridge like a damp cloak, making the city lights seem distant and blurred. The carefully positioned spotlights by Arthur, instead of illuminating, gave the structure an almost ethereal and spectral air, a setting that, for Eliza, felt more funereal than festive. She saw only the invisible threat looming over the unconcerned heads of the crowd. The cold dampness permeated their coats, and a persistent smell of wet rust and disturbed earth hung in the air, mingling with the sweet aroma of freshly roasted coffee beans from a nearby cafe. A woman in a crimson-red dress, with whom Eliza had spoken minutes earlier about the somber beauty of her works, simply vanished. Eliza felt a chill that wasn't from the cold night wind. Elisa's despair grew, becoming a lead ball in her stomach. The premonition wasn't of a physical, noisy collapse, but of a silent, terrifying, and inexplicable disappearance. The suspense tightened in her chest, stealing her breath. The bridge wasn't falling, but it was taking people away, in a way she could never have imagined in her worst nightmare. She felt a prickle of static electricity in the air, as if the very atmosphere was charged with an invisible and omnipresent danger. There was no panic, no screams. The people around, immersed in their conversations and admiration for the art, didn't seem to notice the disappearances. It was as if the bridge was absorbing them, one by one, without a trace, without any disturbance on the surface of reality. The sound of footsteps on the gravel under the bridge seemed to dissipate into the air, swallowed by a strange quietude. Elisa blinked. There was no way she could have moved so quickly in that crowd. The woman was there, a smile on her lips, and in the blink of an eye, she was gone. Elisa approached the spot where the woman had been, the damp ground and crushed dry leaves under her feet seeming strangely empty. Nothing. Just the space where she had been, now filled by other guests who didn't even notice the absence. Elisa felt suffocated by the mass of guests circulating under the bridge, admiring her paintings with an enthusiasm she couldn't share. The constant murmur of conversations, the clinking of wine and champagne glasses, the soft, melancholic jazz playing in the background, everything contributed to an atmosphere of celebration that, to her, sounded like a death knell. She couldn't focus on the polite compliments or the superficial comments about her works. Her restless eyes scanned the crowd, searching for signs, for any indication of the beginning of the nightmare that had rooted itself in her mind. Every metallic creak of the bridge, every snap of the cables under the weight of the guests, made her flinch, her heart pounding in her chest. She spotted Arthur, radiant, with a triumphant glint in his eyes, chatting animatedly with the mayor, whose pearl adornments gleamed under the lights. Her heart sank in despair. There was no stopping them. Fate seemed to be running its inexorable course. It was then that the first disappearance happened. Minutes later, an elderly couple, who were animatedly discussing one of her more abstract canvases, also dissolved into thin air. She tried to get Arthur's attention again, but he was engrossed in conversation, gesticulating enthusiastically towards one of the paintings depicting the tangled cables of the bridge. The premonition of collapse was not of falling bricks and concrete, but of something far more sinister and inexplicable: the annihilation of existence, a silent erasure. The voices around her seemed distant, muffled, as if coming from inside a dark, damp tunnel. Elisa felt like a rat trapped in an invisible snare, the only one to notice the door slowly closing, sealing everyone's fate. She needed to warn Arthur again, more vehemently, with undeniable proof. It had to be now, before it was too late for all of them, before the abyss swallowed anyone else. She took a deep breath, the dense, cold air filling her lungs with a metallic sensation, and ran towards where she had last seen him. Feeling the gravel crunching under her shoes, a sound that was once neutral, but now seemed an urgent and desperate warning. Elisa pushed through the crowd, a wave of panic and urgency propelling her forward. Her heart pounded like an uncontrollable drum in her chest, each beat an echo of the impending disaster. His voice was low and reprimanding, but his eyes showed a hint of concern. She pulled him by the arm, the force of her panic giving her a supernatural strength, dragging him towards the column where she had felt the distortion in the air. The smell of dampness and rust was stronger there, almost suffocating, mixed with a strange, almost sweet and metallic odor she couldn't identify. Elisa saw the rift open subtly, almost imperceptibly, a crack in the air, right beside them. The forced smile he had maintained completely disappeared, replaced by a mask of genuine, pure terror. What was that? He whispered, his voice failing, almost a whimper. Some guests who had noticed the couple's disappearance, or who saw Arthur's horrified face, began to back away, their voices rising in questions and exclamations. The previously festive air was now tense and charged with a latent, almost palpable fear. The fog seemed to tighten around them, the temperature perceptibly dropping, as if life itself was being drained from the environment. She screamed, a pure sound of terror. "No, watch out! Don't get close." But it was too late. The bridge isn't falling, Arthur. It's swallowing people. It's a trap I saw in my mind, and now it's becoming real. One of the man's arms, outstretched as he gestured, passed through the rift, and he let out a muffled cry of surprise more than pain. The couple stumbled one over the other, and before Elisa or Arthur could react, they vanished into thin air, without a sound, without a trace, as if they had never existed. The rift was growing, becoming more visible, like a dark, pulsating stain in the fabric of reality, threatening to swallow everything. Elisa's premonition was a warning, not of the bridge's physical collapse, but of a far more insidious and inexplicable threat, a trap that transcended human understanding. She had to do something now. The laughter and conversations around her, once just the murmur of a party, now seemed to mock her urgency, her certainty of calamity. Arthur frowned, his eyes scanning the empty space. He rubbed them, as if trying to dispel a mirage. "Elisa, there's nothing here. You're exhausted, perhaps. You need rest." He tried to pull his arm free from her grasp. She spotted Arthur near the entrance, a tall, elegant figure, still immersed in his role as the perfect host, greeting the last guests. "Arthur!" she cried, her voice hoarse and desperate, mingling with the growing chaos. He turned, an expression of visible irritation on his face. "Elisa, compose yourself. You're scaring the guests with all this agitation. People are vanishing, Arthur. They're not leaving. They're being sucked in. It's a black hole, a void. Look." She pointed to the spot in the air where the shimmer, an almost invisible ripple, was still visible to her terrified eyes. Suddenly, a young couple, hand in hand, smiling and debating which was the best painting in the exhibition, walked past them. Arthur paled, his eyes widening in a horror that rivaled Elisa's. I tried to warn you, Elisa retorted, tears of despair streaming down her face, washing away the dust and sweat. The murmur of the crowd, which had previously seemed indifferent, began to shift, now with notes of concern, confusion, and finally, panic. Arthur, in shock, seemed paralyzed, his mind unable to process what he had just witnessed. Elisa knew time was running out. The terror, once a whisper, now spread like an uncontrollable wildfire through the exhibition. Panicked screams erupted from all sides as more and more people began to vanish, their silhouettes dissolving into thin air like smoke, leaving no trace. Elisa, however, knew it wasn't just a matter of leaving. The rift, now a clear, pulsating opening in space, slowly widened near them, like a hungry mouth. Elisa ran, her ankle pain ignored, pushing people out of the way, feeling the urgency burning in her veins, pure adrenaline propelling her forward. Arthur reached her, extending his hand to help her. A quick vision flashed through her mind, a glimpse of her own canvas, her painting of the Red Bridge. Once with the bridge empty, now completing itself with the image of a solitary figure in the middle of the void, her own silhouette. Icy panic hit her with full force. She wasn't just witnessing the disaster. She was an intrinsic part of it. Fate, it seemed, was pulling her into her own artwork. Elisa, we have to go, now. There's no more time. She knew she couldn't escape destiny, that she had been marked by it, but she could try to defy it, she could try to change the narrative, even if only for a brief moment, for one last act of will. The smell of rust intensified, almost metallic in the air, mixed with a new odor, which she couldn't identify, but which evoked the sensation of an end of emptiness. She turned towards the rift, feeling drawn to it, but at the same time, seeking a way to resist its call. The race against the void had begun, and she wasn't sure if she would win. She stretched out her arm, pulling the mother and child away at the last second, feeling the intense cold of the rift brush against her skin, an icy, chilling touch. The mother cried, terrified but grateful, her eyes wide as she stared at Elisa. The bridge was becoming a black hole, an anomaly in itself, and the trap was closing, swallowing everything in its path. The smell of metal and dampness under the bridge was now mixed with the sharp scent of fear, a pungent aroma that hung heavy in the cold air. Elisa and Arthur, united by the horror of what they witnessed, tried to warn the crowd, their voices lost in the general chaos. The air vibrated with a strange energy, a guttural resonance, and Elisa felt a subtle, almost magnetic attraction coming from the growing void. It was as if the bridge itself was aspirating her, drawing the life from the environment, from objects, from people. She saw her paintings, once artworks celebrating the beauty of urban decay, now silent witnesses to a bizarre tragedy, her canvases seeming to darken, absorbing the light. The glow of the exhibition lights seemed to dim, swallowed by the darkness emanating from the bridge, a void that deepened with every passing moment. People ran in all directions, stumbling over each other, trapped in a labyrinth of flickering lights and dancing shadows, searching for an exit that seemed not to exist. "Get out of here! Run, please!" Arthur yelled, his voice hoarse from the effort, trying to push people towards the makeshift exit. She saw a family, mother and father with a small child clinging to the mother's legs, trapped in a terrified cluster of people. But with each rescue, the rift seemed to expand, growing in size and in its sinister pull. Elisa stumbled, falling to her knees on the damp gravel, feeling a sharp, throbbing pain in her ankle, a cruel reminder of her mortality. She looked back at the dark expanse the bridge was becoming, the abyss growing. Elisa got up with difficulty, the pain in her ankle throbbing, but her determination was greater than the physical pain.